A clip here. This is the claim you've been hearing everywhere that, of course, COVID-19 now is disproportionately affecting Black Americans because racism.
It's completely unacceptable to say that because, African Americans, Latinos have all of these underlying issues, that then there's nothing that could be done now. I worked in the medical field at the beginning of the AIDS crisis. I remember this. I've seen this before. Obviously, this is different because it's much more widespread, but you need to pay attention to populations.
Someone get Oprah on the phone.
The only thing we know
2 and
is
3 heterosexual couples will have AIDS by 1994.
We need the CDC to, number one, collect the information, but also to disseminate it. We need to make sure that African Americans, when they go to the hospital, they get early treatment. I can just absolutely guess that what is happening is people are being sent home. They get really sick at home, and then by the time they go back,
feel like the lady in red kind of looks like an African American Tulsi Gabbard?
Of dying.
Except she's not African American.
She's definitely not.
What is she?
I'd have no idea. We don't tolerate racism on the show.
Bill.
I won't make the assumption, Bill.
No.
Yeah.
But how will we categorize everyone
I have no
and give
idea.
them preferential treatment?
So,
name tags.
first off, I said that because the virus is not a hoax, okay?
Right.
I'm making sure. But like when people say, did you think AIDS was a hoax? No, the AIDS epidemic was a hoax.
Correct.
And if you go back and watch the video in which I tastelessly gave my dog AIDS as part of the sketch where Hopper played Tom Hanks in Philadelphia, and people were really upset by that. Have you watched this show? Oprah said something to the effect, I don't have the number in front of me, but it's in that video, like 2 out of 3, or if it's 1 out of 3 heterosexual couples will have AIDS by 1993. Yeah. She was so sold on it that she made antiviral treatments a part of her Oprah's favorite things list.
What?
She just handed them out to the audience, which is a gross violation of medical malpractice. And she's not a doctor. So she blew that out. And then at this portion, of course, similar, 2.5 million Americans minimum will die. Yeah. Well, then it's 100,000 to 240,000 once social distancing. And now it's like, well, maybe it's 60,000. And now they're saying it could be lower than that. Yeah. So it's not that the virus is a hoax at all. We're not saying that. It's not even that in this case, the epidemic is a hoax. Unlike AIDS, this is an actual epidemic that can affect everybody.
Right. Yeah.
It's the idea that we were sold a bill of goods on which we made actionable steps, and it was the wrong information. Right. And now they're trying to do this to, as they said, provide preferential treatment to people based on race, which some could say, and by some I mean Merriam-Webster could say is racist.
Yeah.
So let me be really clear about this. Are Black people getting more COVID-19? Yeah. But do we think it's just because are we like shoving them out, like making them walk the plank? Like, all right, Tyrone, get out there, see what happens. Just go to the end of the crescent on this street and let a few people sneeze on you. Yeah. No, the reason is, as we know, people in big cities, why is New York City so much more affected than, say, a place in, West Texas? Yeah. Why same thing in a place in a rural area of Kentucky? Why is that not as affected as San Francisco? That's because, and we've known this is not something that I'm not letting the cat out of the bag, that central urban areas where people are just shoved basically into sardine cans, be them subways or buses or San Francisco apartments with 19 roommates, that is more likely to spread the virus. Now, Black Americans are far more likely to live in urban areas. Don't believe me? Look at the lineup when a new pair of sneakers drops. I know that some white people are out of touch with Black culture, but that is not me.
Yeah, they love the sneaks.
31% more likely than white Americans to live in metropolitan areas or city centers. That's from Stanford, by the way. Want to be really clear about that. Here's another reason, okay? We now know that 90% of COVID deaths, particularly, or severe infection rates, they're a byproduct of pre-existing conditions.
Yeah.
Wow. Particularly heart disease, diabetes. Obesity. This is a huge problem. Black Americans, now we can talk about the reason why. I know some people throw out the idea of food deserts, and I would respond with Amazon food cart for 5 years now. You can get any food anywhere in the country, not amid a crisis, but any other time, and you can get it cheaper than you would purchase it locally at your bodega. Black Americans have a significantly higher rate of diabetes and obesity. Black men, 1.3 times to be as obese as whites, and then Black women being 2.3 times more obese than white women. They're also far more likely to have pre-existing conditions, heart disease, blood pressure. I'm sure there's heart pressure. I'm
sure.
The Grinch must have had something going on there. How do you go 4 sizes that day? There's something wrong with him.
Poor guy.
And the
cardiologist.
Grinch, who was it? Something they say had a congenital heart defect, which led to his immediate incapacitation that day.
And his contraction of COVID-19.
Think about that. When his heart is growing, it's going boom, 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 boom. And first off, it's like, why is there brass surrounding his heart?
Yeah.
Whoever performed that operation, that's not the proper procedure for a stint.
No, not at all. And why is there that much extra space?
Steampunk surgery. It's got a bunch of little valves and
hat
knobs.
on and a little goggle.
Monocle.
Yeah.
Every time the Grinch takes Viagra, it's like the train in Dumbo just. So here we go. They have a two times the incident rate of diabetes by midlife. This comes from the CDC and Science Daily. And a new paper shows that actually obesity is the single biggest determining factor right now that we have available in whether you have a severe case of COVID-19, meaning whether you recover from it or you end up with a hospitalization. The stat I have is hospitalization, not death. So that means severe symptoms. Also, by the way, here's another reason. So we have urban areas, and then we have pre-genetic health dispositions. And then, of course, this is something, if we want to talk about cultural, Black Americans have a far greater distrust for people in positions of authority. Think hands up, don't shoot. Right. Listen, I'm not saying that it's ill-founded for a lot of Black Americans. Over 20% more likely to distrust police and the criminal justice system. They do not follow COVID protocols as much as white suburban Americans right now. And I don't blame them. Listen, people have been championing this cause that there is systemic oppression and discrimination where they don't feel represented by their local government, including places like Chicago, even though their mayor is catfish eyes and also Black. Baltimore, where the entire city council, was Black. The lady in charge of it was Black. You can pick your city. They don't trust them. So when you say, all right, listen, everybody stay home. Hey, you stay home!
They do a block party.
Bitch, I got stuff to do. That's what happens.
Yeah.
This is a reality right now. We have to take this into account, and not that there's some kind of genetic trait that is or systemic discrimination right now proactively that is forcing Black Americans into coronavirus-ridden graves. No, they distrust the system, rightfully so. You guys have been saying that more so than anybody else. Pre-existing genetic conditions, and of course the fact that they live overwhelmingly in urban areas. That is a recipe for contracting coronavirus. And so, rather than playing identity politics, I would like to see us educate members of different communities. Just like, is it racist to say,
absolutely.
hey, listen, China, no more wet markets? Just because
cut that out.
This isn't
Steven,
a moral
you're a
judgment.
racist.
It's not a moral judgment.
Our wet markets are amazing.
Right, it's like,
They're amazing.
it's just like wet bar. It's just like wet bar, just a little marble
Indoor pool.
Dog. And bat. No. Sometimes we have bat on dog. Yeah, look, bat eating dog right now. That's very tasty.
Oh man. Well, look, I think something else. It's almost like there are other things that are impacting this number more so than is it Black, white, Hispanic, whatever it may be. What about age? If we're gonna play this card, we can have an ageism, right? Yeah. This virus is targeting people that are pretty much older. So is this should we
No,
be?
that's correct.
What I'm saying is
you're correct.
We can base all of our policy on that.
This disease is ageist.
It is ageist,
It
right?
is.
But here's the thing: in 1918,
disproportionately affecting
influenza
Edna's.
was not right. It actually attacked people that were healthy and younger because their immune systems overreacted to it. The point is that it would be a much better study to look at income level and say, oh, if you're a low-income worker, you're probably not able to not have a job right now.
Right.
You've got to go out and work, which means you're much more likely to be exposed.
Right.
That's not our fault. Right. That's not systemic racism.
Who's the hour here?
Well,
Gerald?
meaning everybody's, the society's fault.
Yeah.
It could be a white person that can't do it. It could be a Black
People who
person,
look like
a Hispanic
Frasier?
person. There's plenty of people. My dad's construction
Do you need
company.
to pick
They're
up
still
that
working.
hood under your desk?
Why did you put it there again?
No, that's.
I told you.
So
no,
Gerald,
I won't join.
Gerald, you actually have a really good point. So there was a graph that came out a couple days ago. Yes, I know, shocking. That showed that if you, depending on where you fell in an income bracket, you had maybe 3 to 7 days earlier to start sheltering in place because of the type of job you have without an income impact.
Especially if you're a tornado chaser.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you just It's hard. You're ready. It's hard out there for the tornado chasers.
They just had some really bad ones yesterday, so I don't want to laugh.
But it's an important distinction because ultimately the news stories you hear about saying, oh well, it's disproportionately affecting one race versus the other, again ignores the other socioeconomic factors that divide us.
Right.
That lead to more, right? The obesity, the income, those other factors, but those just aren't as sexy. Those aren't going to foment.
Well, they bring them
voters.
up. If ever they bring them up through the prism of race. Like, yes, okay, it is true that Black people have higher obesity rates. Now, that's not because of systemic discrimination at this point. I'm sorry, I was dirt poor living out of my car.
Exactly.
I lived on $2.50 on a luxurious day, $4.50 because I would get a Baja Fresh burrito. I've talked about this before. You can eat healthily. Now there are different, just like culturally. I don't know what you're raised with. Frankly, I don't know if it's just like I just assume there's no flavor whatsoever, like peas and carrots with like pot roast.
That's it.
We all eat different things. That is a cultural divide.
Look, I've been obese since my parents were both unemployed when I was young, and even today. So clearly, it is nothing.
I'm pretty sure we're all obese,
and I'm Asian.
I'm
we're
obese
like
according to the chart.
To not be obese, and yet I am defying the statistics.
Bucking the curb.
Okay, you
There you
can't
go, man.
you can't be extraordinary
You're the
without
outlier.
being extra.